Well, welcome to our second Scottish Women's Rights Network Scotland podcast. Today we're really excited because we've got Lucy from Safeguarding Our Schools to talk to us about some of the issues that have led her to be involved in working with schools around some of these issues. And I think that today's article in the Times, where the schoolgirl was bullied out of school, is actually quite a timely article for us, really, because it kind of highlights and raises some of the concerns that we all have about what's happening in our schools at the moment. So welcome, Lucy.
Hi, thanks very much for inviting me on. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, so it's Anna and I again who are here to chat with you, and we thought it would be really helpful if you could tell us a little bit about how Safeguarding Our Schools got started, what was the impetus for that, and
yeah, of course, no worries at all. So it started. I have another Twitter account which was Parents Across Scotland, and it started growing quite rapidly, and I was getting parents getting in touch with me, just raising concerns about things that was going on in schools. But I'm just one person, so I was kind of trying to signpost them wherever I could, and then I didn't realise there was a group of teachers actually set up, and they were having their own concerns and seeing these issues in school. So one of the teachers got in touch with me. She was actually due to come on tonight, but she lost her voice, unfortunately. But she got in touch with me, and she was like, "Look, could we get together and just see if we could do something here?" So we did. We met up. We didn't know each other, just met up on Twitter, and both of us were sitting going, we'd been sitting waiting. Do you know that we were waiting, thinking somebody's going to come along and they're going to do something about schools, like somebody's going to step in here, and we realised that actually it was going to need to be us. So we kind of put our heads together and decided that we would come up with a grassroots organisation, and we reached out to a couple of other people that we knew. So we have 5 of us that are the sort of founding members, if you like, and there's a whole array of backgrounds. So we've got teachers, parents, child protection professionals, parents of children who are experiencing gender distress, and they've had their own concerns with what's happened in schools and things like that. So we just all got together and decided that we were going to tackle the issues that parents and teachers were seeing in schools, and we came up with Safeguarding Our Schools just because we liked SOS and we think Scotland really needs a wee bit of help just now in regards to the situation in schools. So we decided to form it then. We've been in operation just since March, actually, this year, so fairly new, but we've got off the ground running. I mean, the first day that we started, our phones were buzzing off the tables. We were just like everybody getting in touch, parents asking for help, teachers getting in touch. Just so many people saying, "Have we got resources? How can we get in touch?" So we were like building resources as fast as we possibly could. But we'd a great support from I don't know if you know Safe Schools Alliance.
Yeah.
So we met with them prior to setting up, just to kind of see how they worked and what support we could get from them. And they were really kind and let us sort of bounce off the back of their resources and just Spotify them. And we got a website on the go, and got a Twitter page, we've got email set up, and we just really went from there.
I mean, it's interesting you saying that, we were all kind of waiting for someone to step in. And it's like that across the whole range of issues, isn't it? That we're just kind of hoping that someone at some point is going to see some sense here and actually say, you know what, enough is enough.
You're waiting for the adult, and then you realise, oh God, I'm the adult, we've got to actually do this.
Exactly. So what sort of kind of concerns were teachers and parents coming to you with? What were the sorts of things they were raising?
So I suppose the biggest concern that people have came to us with at the start really was around mixed sex toilets in school. That appeared to be such a widespread issue across Scotland. And as we know that there's the building regulations that seem to have just went out the window. Those are in place, they're law. There've been consultations about potentially changing it, but they've not been changed. That is the law just now, which requires single-sex toilets. So parents were getting in touch saying, look, my school's changed these toilets, we weren't consulted, our kids weren't consulted. And then I think as we get more established and people realise that we were actually looking more into safeguarding, we were getting concerns around bullying, concerns around the curriculum, concerns around the guidance in schools and the impact that it was having. Teachers were getting in touch with us. I mean, we recently got a contact of a teacher, and she wrote us a massive document of the issues that have impacted her school, and she provided all the examples in the evidence that we've been able to look at, but keep it anonymous for her because she's in a position where she doesn't feel able to freely speak about it. Although she's done a lot of getting in touch with her head teacher, trying to join groups in her school to try and tackle issues, taking it to local authority, but she can't speak about it publicly on social media or anything. But she was just highlighting the concerns around like children's names and pronouns being changed, and specific emails that were coming to all teachers telling them not to tell the parents, and like 7 and 8 times a child was changing their name, and she was coming up against that. She'd seen the bullying and the impact of lobby groups coming into schools as well, and delivering training and providing teachers with resources and training, and just how as soon as they come into the school, the teachers, a lot of the teachers, not all of them, just kind of galvanise and think, oh, this is brilliant, it gives us an opportunity, and then they're just running with it without any critical thinking or evidence base off the back of it. But yeah, so that's the main concerns that we've had coming in, is single-sex spaces, bullying, curriculum, and the guidance as well.
Right. And what about you, Anna, from your perspective as a parent? Do these things sound familiar to you?
It absolutely resonates with me. I have been in touch with my teenagers' school, and I was told that they don't usually hear from parents with my opinions or beliefs. And I firmly believe that's because the majority of parents are absolutely in the dark about what their children are being taught about this subject at school. Mm-hmm. Because I know several parents with children at the same school, and when I told them about the conversation I'd had and why, it was news to them. They'd no idea. I have friends with young teenagers at other schools who've said, do you think they're teaching that at my school too? Absolutely. Go and find out.
So what sort of things are they teaching on the curriculum then? I've seen, some stuff that's around and it looks pretty awful to me, but I'm not a parent, so there is that bit where you're not bringing that perspective to it.
Well, from my knowledge, gender ideology is taught as fact, and it's fact. It's not up for debate. It's not up for discussion. And if you do speak up, your peers will not respond well. You will become vilified. Mm-hmm. And there's no support for that child.
Mm-hmm. I think I was
going to say, I know one young teenager, and the suggestion was made that they should possibly keep the views to themselves when they're going to harm other people. And that view was that you can't change sex.
Mm. So really what we're seeing then is what was highlighted today in that article, where that girl was bullied for believing that you can't change sex, which actually is a fact. You can't change sex. Correct. Is that what's the sort of things that you're hearing in terms of bullying, Lucy?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. I think what you were saying there, Anna, it's mirrored across so many concerns that we hear from parents around the compelled speech side of things, and how their children are struggling, and even not necessarily struggling, but if they use correct pronouns and they don't use the change of pronouns, then they're being ostracised, they're being bullied, they're being cut out of their peer groups. I mean, we've got a space on our website where we've been sharing the testimonies of parents and of teachers anonymously to give them a voice and just raise these issues for them, and that people can go on and have a look at sosscotland.com, and it'll give you an idea of the sort of impact that this is having. I mean, we've heard it from a primary 6 10-year-old child who was bullied and ostracised and sent to the head teacher and like pulled up for being disrespectful for using correct pronouns for somebody in our class. There's a parent got in touch with us actually recently to let us know about her teenage son who is dyslexic. He has memory processing issues alongside it, so he cannot remember different pronouns and he genuinely struggles with it. And he was, again, like picked on, bullied, but he was also then sent to the head teacher, and there was a meeting between him and the other child and their parents, and that her son, the mum that was speaking to us about it, she said he's normally really emotionally contained and he can handle these situations. He was sitting in tears, absolutely in tears, in the office, being screamed at by this other child because he was unable to remember to change pronouns for him. So it's definitely across the board, and I think what we're finding is that as much as it's happening directly in schools, teachers are telling us that there's not really a lot of support round about them to be able to handle these situations, because they're being led by the Scottish Government's guidance, the Supporting Transgender Pupils in Schools guidance, which is an affirmation document. Basically, it's just promoting social transition, and it's promoting, as Anna absolutely rightly said, it's promoting a faith-based belief as a fact. Everybody can hold a faith-based belief. We've got absolutely no issue with that side of it, but it's being taught as fact, which doesn't leave any room for questions. So when children sensibly are saying, no, I don't agree with that, or like sex is real, like that we girl in the Times article today, like, no, sex is actually real. When children are questioning that, they're being placed in this position where their teachers don't know how to support them, because the teachers are not getting the support that they need to manage this situation properly, because there's no guidance in place. They're relying on this one piece of guidance, which it really offers no support to them whatsoever. So they're kind of just being left, and like part of the guidance is that the child's well-being and safety and all that stuff is paramount, and absolutely we all know that should be the case. I mean, but who makes the decision about what the best interests of that child are? So like, if we're hearing about parents not being told when their children are struggling with gender issues, it's removing parents from being able to support that child, because a teacher's making a decision about what the best interests are for the child without any support round about them to say that is the right decision for that child. So there's so many different issues that we're seeing across schools, that you sometimes get whiplash where you need to position yourself on it.
And you touched on it there. Sorry.
No,
it's very ableist. As you say, any neurodivergent child struggles with the changing names and the changing pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
I heard of one student that overheard a conversation of two peers discussing what pronouns are you using this week or today. So if they're deciding on a daily basis, what chance does anyone else stand of getting it right? And then the pronoun police are waiting, and if there's any slip up, there is zero tolerance.
Well, I think it's to be expected, especially when you've got groups that are coming into schools to deliver training to teachers and to some of them are directly influence the curriculum. It's built into it. And I mean, the posters, for example, LGBT Youth Scotland, they provide resources, and the posters that are up in most schools are respect my pronouns. So of course that message is being kind of displayed everywhere a child goes. So the children who are changing their pronouns have got this expectation that everybody must jump to the beat of their drum, basically. And it's setting a situation up where other children are being placed at a disadvantage who aren't able to go along with this, or who don't want to, because they've got a right to say, no, I don't agree, or I feel differently. Or
do you think they really understand what all this pronoun stuff is about? I mean,
no,
do you think?
I think that there's got to be we've got to remember, I think, that we're talking about a very natural and normal part of development for children. I mean, if you think about the sort of Erikson's model of development, there's stages that a child goes through, and the adolescent stage is really the primary goal of adolescence is to figure out a coherent identity for yourself. If that is interrupted, then the risk that it presents is that it leaves you as a very confused adult as you grow up, because you've not been able to form a coherent identity in your adolescence, which is the perfect time. So we're putting an adult agenda into a very normal stage of childhood development, and that is interfering with it. But on the other side of that, you've got the absolutely normal developmental side of it, where children are exploring. And see if they were just exploring and saying, oh, do you know what, non-binary or whatever, and there wasn't anything on the back of it, like the bullying that we're seeing, like the potential for being on a pathway to medicalisation, if that all wasn't there, this would be a really normal stage for them to go through. Mm-hmm. So there's a part of me that doesn't really I don't blame the children at all that are experimenting with this.
Agreed.
Because they think that they're the renegades, don't they? I mean, we all went through it, and we all think that when we're teenagers that we know everything and it's the right time, but they're just doing a natural thing that they should be doing. It's when the adult agenda comes into it that it makes it a wee bit trickier, and it's impacting not just on that child but on everybody round about them as well.
But of course, also the other thing that we're doing there is that we're actually saying to children, and young people, you can be changed sex, you can be a different gender, but actually your body is doing what that body would do. So if you're female, it's developing as a female. If you're a boy, you're developing as a boy. And actually there's a psychological mismatch between what they're thinking or believing and actually what's happening with their bodies. And surely that is just storing up psychological issues for children and young people in the future.
Well, it just makes them more vulnerable if they've not got that sense of awareness about themselves. And that's what I was saying about the developmental side of it, that they need to go through that stage in order to grow into a secure adult and somebody, and it takes a while. You don't just get there overnight. I'm in my 40s and I've just got there, and I've still got more learning to do. Do you know that way? Like I know I'll be in my 60s and still be like, oh, I'm learning that. But as you
won't be. By the time you get to your 60s, you'll be in Erikson's stage where you're reflecting on your life.
You're like, oh God, why did I do that? But it's just, you need to be able to go through that process in order to develop a resilience and a strong character for yourself. And I feel that we're interfering far too much in that state. And again, just part of, like, to go back to the Scottish Government guidance, it's not age differentiated, so it's basically wide across from nursery right through your school life. And part of the resources, I'm sure you will be fully aware of this, but they recommend the I Am Jazz book, which, like, to quote it, it's I'm a boy. I was a boy with a girl brain, and this is transgender. It specifically says this, and what it also says is that Jazz knew that he was a toddler boy. Jazz knew that he was a girl from 3 years old. And again, what it's doing is it's cutting out a fundamental developmental stage of childhood. Childhood is a protected state, but we're cutting that out by promoting this resource, because we're saying to children, don't have they don't have a fixed understanding of sex at that age. They don't know what a boy or a girl is. A boy doesn't know if he wears a blue t-shirt or a pink t-shirt, that it's a feminine thing. These are stereotypes. So they're reinforcing stereotypes at a stage where a child hasn't even developed an understanding of what their sex is. And this is a resource that's been promoted into Scottish schools by our government. It's
And also, if you
unbelievable.
look at what's happening with Jazz Jennings now, I mean, that's, major issues and problems for...
Absolutely heartbreaking when you see.
It is heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. I think one of the concerns... Sorry, Anna, on you go.
No, I was just going to ask, do you see the parents of teenage girls, are they the largest group that are transitioning? Obviously, because we spoke last week about how it's 4,000 or 5,000% increase in teenage girls. And are you actually seeing that in the information you're getting from all your sources?
Absolutely. You know, that document I was saying that teacher sent us over, and this is just one school, so I'm just using this one example, but we have more. Every single example that she provided for us that is in her school is girls, and the majority of them have neurodivergent issues, mostly autism. So there's a although we don't know how widespread and how in depth the teaching of gender ideology is in schools, there's obviously some link there that it's happening in several schools. We don't know exactly which schools. We've not been able to get that information because you really don't know how far in they've got. But it's primarily girls that it's impacting. But on the other side of it, we're hearing from boys who are saying they're extremely uncomfortable with the thought of girls who identify as boys being in their changing rooms and having to share toilets with them, and they're embarrassed by it. They don't know how to act around them, and they just feel a bit awkward and even more mortified than what it is to be a teenager at this stage anyway. They're getting this on top of it as well. But it's definitely mostly girls that we're seeing, because girls are more susceptible to social contagion. We know this. They're an extremely vulnerable group to that.
And I think as well, as obviously it's been taught in schools, but I also think all that lockdown period where a lot of teenagers, a lot of young people were on social media a lot more than they would have been. They've got a lot of indoctrination on there as well. During those lockdowns, because I know in my daughter's case, when school resumed, there was a whole swathe came back.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing, Anna. And I think as well, if we think about the Lisa Littman study and the rapid onset gender dysphoria, now it's obviously not a diagnostic term. It's still not understood fully, but it's definitely something that can be used because it's a cohort that we're seeing. But within that study that she done, she identified that this sort of rapid onset of gender dysphoria was appearing after a significant increase in use of social media. Now, if we think about lockdown and what you've just said, and the impact that had on children, and now we're seeing that fallout from it with schools who are getting trans-identified girls in bigger numbers than they really ever were before. I mean, there was hardly any girls that identified this way, but it is girls that are doing it now, and that does reflect Lisa Littman's study into the rapid onset, and that's obviously due to in part to social contagion, because I mean, you only need to spend 2 minutes on TikTok and it's absolutely apparent that it's a social contagion. Everybody's like cheering each other on. It's a ready-made glitter family for girls and boys, particularly girls who are maybe feeling a bit socially excluded. They're not really fitting in, and they go on TikTok and they go on these spaces, and they've got all this ready-made affirmation, and then they're going into school and they're getting this affirmation now as well. And then you've got the big bad parents who are at the other side of it saying, no, well, let's slow down and let's just take our time with this and figure out what's actually going on. But their parents are coming up against battles against schools and against their own children. And it's a really, really difficult time for families just now, I think. Like, families are really struggling.
One of the things I wanted to ask was around the guidance and the secrecy between schools and parents, and clearly that's a breakdown of any safeguarding child protection guidance, which even the government, Scottish government, produces. You know, fundamentally is saying, you know, don't keep secrets. So, but here we have this, you know, policy which is actually actively advocating that. I mean, are you seeing parents who are coming saying that, you know, schools have transitioned their children and not told them?
Yeah. We have clear examples of it. We have several, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I've worked in child protection for goodness me about 20 years, and that's a fundamental aspect of it. I mean, you could do that in Safeguarding 101, is you don't keep secrets. You don't keep secrets with children, obviously, because it creates a bigger issue around safeguarding. It creates that kind of loophole where grooming can potentially like gain momentum. But on the other side of it, we're now seeing that it's impacting parents as well, because although what the guidance does is it says that you have to get the child's permission before informing the parents. But that's for me, it makes a mockery of the whole thing, because you shouldn't be leading with the thought that a parent is abusive. You should be enacting safeguarding protocols if there is concerns about abusive parents, but the majority of parents are not abusive. So you should not be keeping this information from them. And if teachers are keeping this information from them, my concern now is that it's breaking down that really important relationship between parents and schools, because we can see that already that it is really precarious at the moment. Parents are distrusting of schools and teachers now because they're really worried about what's being taught to their children. The other day I get an email from a parent whose kid was just about to start school, so they're maybe 4 or 5 years old, and she's like, I am absolutely petrified to send my child to school. Now it's so difficult because she's got no experience of anything else apart from what she's hearing, and what we're trying to do is just encourage parents and teachers and schools to work together a wee bit more. So we are trying to be that sort of middle person for them to bridge the gap, so we can approach them and say, look, there's parents raising these concerns, so that they're not putting themselves or their children in the firing line, because that's what a lot of them are worried about. But we know that relationship between schools and parents is fundamental to keeping children safe, and we're just really concerned at the minute that it's being kind of broken down a little bit because of this secret keeping, and you don't need to tell parents, and parents are feeling pushed out of their own children's lives, because how can you be the best person to support your child if you don't know what's happening for them? It's like it's just absolutely obvious, and I can't believe that there was a group of people in our government who sat around and developed this guidance and then put it out without any safeguarding consideration, because that's what it looks like. There's so many potential risks within the guidance, that it's just unbelievable that anybody let it go through without scrutiny.
I know. I mean,
For WRN Scotland have done a document. I was at an event a few weeks ago where they had a speaker, and they have a document, and I can't remember the name of it, where they pick the holes in that.
Yeah.
And I think the Children's Commissioner said it's up for the schools to make sure the guidance is legal, not them.
Yeah, so it's non-statutory guidance, which obviously means that it is just that, it's guidance, it's not law. And what the government have done is that they've put the onus back onto local authorities and schools and basically said you're responsible for it. And what For WRN Scotland done is they contacted some local authorities and they contacted some schools to see if they were using the guidance, and to see if they'd sought legal advice. And most schools were like, no, we haven't. Why would we? It's government approved guidance. So as much as it's non-statutory, schools are just taking it as it's going to be the best practice possible because it's come from the government. But I think the document you were talking about, Anna, is maybe the Sex Matters and Transgender Trends came together and developed, and For WRN Scotland inputted in it as well, and they basically developed a Scottish edition that counters the guidance that's
Yes,
up here.
I think you're
It's getting renewed at the minute, but they're going to be reproducing a new document. But it basically works with the Equality Act and making sure that everybody's protected, so that there's not any gaps in safeguarding, because right now there's massive ones, and we're seeing it all the time. Young people who have got issues with their gender, they're kind of sitting outside the safeguarding frameworks at the moment, because they're telling them that it's not a child wellbeing and protection concern to be transgender, without thinking about the fact that it could be a protection concern. If a child comes in and they've completely changed their look, they've changed their clothes, they've changed their identity, what you would do like maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago, is you'd think, wait a wee minute, is there something going on for that child? I need to look into something a wee bit more. But now it's totally overshadowed by the fact that they've got a transgender identity, and that means that there's potential safeguarding elements and risks that are being missed. So it's trying to balance that with making sure they're protected, but the other children are also protected from the bullying and the sort of ostracisation if they don't agree with it. So it's such a complicated mess, really.
So when that reviewed guidance from Sex Matters comes out, we should really all be sending it to every school in Scotland then?
I've done it with my own children's school. I've got 2 kids in primary school, and with their first edition, my own daughter went through some issues in school with bullying around this particular issue around pronouns and all that. So I just sent in the documents, and I think that it's really important, because my daughter's school were really receptive, and we had great conversations from it. And I think that's the important part that we need to remember, is that most schools will be willing to have these conversations, and they will be willing to listen. There's some schools that are unfortunately really captured, and it'll be a wee bit more difficult, which is where we would maybe step in, and we've got resources on our website. We've got how to talk to schools, preemptive questions that they might come back with, and then we've got a complaints process that can be followed as well. But just starting off with that first conversation, saying, look, have you seen this guidance? Do you know that there's other guidance that can be used that's in line with the Equality Act? There's other options here for you, because again, just to reiterate, that it's non-statutory guidance that's produced by the government, so they don't have to use it.
That's a really good point, actually. And I suppose what that also leads me on to is, what can we do in the Women's Rights Network to, help with some of this? What are the things that, and maybe that's another conversation to have, because it just seems such a, a minefield of a whole different range of issues. So, and that, I found that really helpful. But if there are things that you think that we could be, focusing on or supporting, then that would be really helpful.
I think there's one thing that we've found has been really helpful, is we've got a parent council letter on our website, and we're recommending that people go and they can email it to their parent councils. They can email it to as many parent councils as they want. Just let us know who you're emailing it to, and it just covers absolutely everything. It's like around single-sex spaces and all that kind of stuff. But when parent councils are receiving it, what they're doing is they're adding it onto their agendas, and one parent council has been sending out questionnaires as well to parents to get more feedback, because these are a really good way to target schools and find out what's actually happening. So get in touch with parent councils and support us like that way. There's loads of different ways, but that's one of the good ways to do it.
All right, okay. So that's something that we could be recommending that our members certainly doing. Will you come back, Lucy? Because we are running out of time.
Of course, yeah.
There's so much here that it feels like we've skirted around some of the issues.
Too much, isn't there?
Is there anything else you want to add, Anna?
No, other than I think we need you back, because it's such a huge topic.
No, definitely. I'd be happy to.
And you were saying there's the kind of 3 issues around the curriculum, the guidance, and what was the other one? I've forgotten it already, which is pretty terrible, really. But There were three issues, not the mixed sex toilets. There was that you were dealing with. There was
the lobby groups, was it maybe?
yes. So maybe actually some focused discussions with you about each of those things might be really helpful if you were up for doing that.
Absolutely, yep. And I could update you on, we've met with the Scottish Conservatives, other MPs, we're meeting with Respect Me to try and tackle the bullying issue. So there's definitely loads more that we could go into.
Okay. Well, I think we'll definitely have you back then. That would be fantastic.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for joining us. That was really, really, really interesting. And it is, I suppose it's surprising that this has just taken such a, has developed so quickly within our schools and stuff. So thank you for sharing. Yeah, it will take a lot of unpicking, and thank you for sharing that with us.